The stage lights shimmered like 1,000 restless stars, casting a glowing haze across the massive auditorium. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their whispers blending into a low hum that felt alive. Tonight wasn't just another audition night, it felt different. Electric, unpredictable. As the cameras swept across the judges' panel, Simon leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing that familiar expression, a mix of skepticism and mild boredom. He had seen it all, or so he believed. The host stepped onto the stage, smiling brightly as the applause swelled. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next act traveled a long way to be here tonight, all the way from the Philippines." The crowd cheered politely, though not wildly. It wasn't uncommon. International acts often brought charm, but rarely something unforgettable. Simon barely reacted. From the side of the stage, a young boy emerged. He couldn't have been older than 13. His clothes were simple, almost too simple for a stage this grand. He carried something unusual in his hands, a bundle of what looked like bamboo tubes tied together with thin cords. The audience quieted, curious murmurs rippling through the seats. Simon tilted his head slightly. "What on earth is that?" he muttered, not bothering to hide his confusion. The boy reached the center of the stage, his steps careful but steady. He smiled shyly, gripping the bamboo instrument as if it were both fragile and sacred. "Hello," the host said warmly. "What's your name?" "My name is Mateo," the boy replied, his voice soft but clear. "And how old are you, Mateo?" "I'm 13 years old." The crowd let out a collective "ah," charmed by his innocence. "Mateo," the host continued, "what will you be doing for us today?" Mateo lifted the bamboo instrument slightly. "I will play this." A few chuckles slipped from the audience. Even Simon smirked. "And what is that exactly?" one of the judges asked. "It's called a bamboo flute set," Mateo explained. "In my village, we make them by hand. Each piece has a different sound." Simon leaned forward now, mildly intrigued but still unconvinced. "So, you're going to play music with that?" he asked bluntly. "Yes, sir," Mateo nodded. Simon shrugged, exchanging a glance with the other judges. "All right, let's hear it." The stage lights dimmed slightly, focusing all attention on Mateo. The massive room seemed to shrink, the noise dissolving into silence. Mateo took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a brief moment. In that instant, something shifted. The nervous boy disappeared, replaced by someone deeply connected to what he was about to do. He lifted the bamboo instrument to his lips. The first note floated into the air, soft, almost fragile. It was so quiet that people leaned forward, unsure if they had truly heard it. Then came another note, slightly stronger. Then another. Within seconds, the melody began to form. It wasn't just music, it was a story. The sound was unlike anything the audience had expected. It was earthy, raw, yet hauntingly beautiful. Each note carried a warmth that felt alive, as if the bamboo itself was breathing. Mateo's fingers moved gracefully, shifting between the tubes with precision far beyond his years. The melody grew richer, layering itself into something deeply emotional. It evoked images of lush green landscapes, flowing rivers, and quiet sunsets. It felt ancient, like a voice echoing from generations long past. Simon's smirk faded, his posture changed, his arms slowly uncrossing as he leaned forward. His eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but in focus. Mateo continued, his confidence building with every note. The music swelled, rising and falling like waves. It carried joy, sorrow, hope, all intertwined seamlessly. The audience was completely silent now. No whispers, no movement, just listening. Then, suddenly, Mateo shifted tempo. The gentle melody transformed into something faster, more dynamic. His fingers danced across the bamboo tubes, producing a rhythm that seemed impossible for such a simple instrument. The sound filled the auditorium, vibrant and alive. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One of the judges leaned toward another, whispering, "How is he doing that?" Simon didn't say a word. His eyes were locked on Mateo, unblinking. The music intensified further, reaching a peak that sent chills through the room. It was powerful, commanding attention in a way no one had anticipated. And then, silence. Mateo lowered the instrument slowly, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. For a split second, nothing happened. The entire auditorium seemed frozen in time. Then, like a sudden explosion, the crowd erupted. Thunderous applause filled the room, people rising to their feet almost instantly. Cheers echoed from every corner, louder than anything heard that night. Mateo blinked in surprise, overwhelmed by the reaction. One judge stood up, clapping enthusiastically. Another followed, and then, all eyes turned to Simon. He was still seated, but his expression had changed completely. Gone was the skepticism. Gone was the boredom. In its place was something rare. Genuine astonishment. Simon slowly stood up. The audience roared even louder, sensing the significance of the moment. It wasn't just a standing ovation, it was Simon standing. Mateo's eyes widened, his lips parting in disbelief. Simon clapped, not casually, but with intention. When the applause finally began to settle, the host stepped forward, grinning. "Well, I think we know how that went." The judges exchanged glances, still visibly impressed. One of them spoke first. "Mateo, that was absolutely beautiful. I've never heard anything like that in my life." Another nodded eagerly. "You took something so simple and turned it into something magical." Mateo smiled shyly, his cheeks flushed. Then it was Simon's turn. The room fell quiet again. Simon leaned toward his microphone, pausing for a moment as if choosing his words carefully. "Mateo," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I'll be honest with you." A ripple of anticipation moved through the crowd. "When you walked out here with that," he gestured lightly toward the bamboo instrument, "I didn't expect much." A few laughs broke out, but quickly faded as Simon continued. "But what you just did," he paused, shaking his head slightly, "was extraordinary." The audience erupted again. Simon raised a hand slightly, signaling for quiet. "That wasn't just music," he continued. "That was storytelling. That was emotion. That was something real." Mateo's eyes shimmered, clearly moved. "And do you know what makes it even more impressive?" Simon added. Mateo shook his head gently. "You didn't need a big production. You didn't need backing tracks or flashy effects. You just stood there, with a handmade instrument, and completely owned this stage." The applause swelled once more. Simon leaned back slightly, a small smile forming. "You surprised me," he said simply. "And that doesn't happen often." Mateo let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The host stepped in again. "All right, judges, let's make it official." One by one, the judges gave their votes. "Yes, yes, yes, absolutely." The crowd cheered louder with each one. Finally, Simon leaned forward. Mateo looked at him, nervous but hopeful. Simon smirked slightly. "Of course it's a yes." The room exploded with applause. Mateo covered his mouth, tears slipping down his cheeks as the realization hit him. He had done it. From a small village to one of the biggest stages in the world, armed with nothing but bamboo and passion. He had not only performed, he had captivated. As the music swelled and confetti began to fall, Mateo stood at the center of the stage, overwhelmed but radiant. And for once, Simon Cowell was truly speechless.